Hi, I'm Dr. Nathan, and this is Vet Talk, the Veterinary Podcast. Today, we are going to do two things. First, I'm going to channel my inner John Oliver, except without his lovely sense of humor and well-timed jokes. And no British accent either, sorry guys. But, like John Oliver does, we're going to talk about something I think is very important and very tedious. I want to go through the Practice Act of my state of Kentucky for you. Why? Well, honestly, I want to have a discussion about some of the problems that have made me, if I hadn't locked myself into it in a variety of ways, want to leave the profession of vet medicine, and how I want us all to kind of work together better. I like the challenges that come with life, but I don't like when people add to those challenges. I have found my colleagues don't always offer the best support because veterinarians are independent by nature. This sometimes makes them think that rules are for other people. I can fight my clients, I can fight diseases, I can even fight my government when I think they are being unjust. But then, when my colleagues don't support fair competition in businesses and help me care for mutual patients, I lose faith in the profession. Because, well, if we don't support each other, at least for caring for animals, and each other by abiding by the same rules, then it's a free-for-all. I'm fine with that if I know the laws of the government won't be applied to some versus others. I want to make a few things clear. First, I'm sort of anti-government. In my head, I dream I am a Jeffersonian Republican, but I find the more I live, in reality, I'm an FDR Democrat. I distrust the government, but also realize because I live in society, I have to abide by rules, which I may not like, but abide by them all the same, so I can have a certain amount of protection for when people don't hurt me by abiding by rules they do not like. Also, for this episode, I just want to point out I'm an average veterinarian giving input on how I am interpreting the Practice Act. If you have questions, reach out to the Board of Veterinary Medicine or a lawyer. I'm just giving you a take, and I am no lawyer, and I'm not on the Board of Veterinary Medicine. I am happy to have provided the board feedback as they revise the Practice Act, and I'm happy to say I feel they have worked very hard to create a good document. I have gripes, but overall I think they have most definitely improved the Practice Act, which, if people follow it, will raise the standard of medicine in Kentucky. So the following is just a discussion. Nothing more, nothing less. And again, if you want a legal interpretation of this, contact the lawyer or contact the board themselves. When I complete this episode, I'm going to send it to the board and ask them if they would like to come on the podcast and respond to any of my comments or help explain the Practice Act. So I hope that happens because that could be an important interview. Also, this is the Practice Act from Kentucky. I do not know anything about other states' Practice Acts, nor do I plan on knowing anything about them unless I move to another state. This talk will be boring probably, because it's just reading text and wondering how to apply it. And frankly, for this episode, I couldn't think of any funny jokes to insert like John Oliver does when he does boring stuff. So yeah, this episode is going to be my guess of application of some laws. And it's my guess as someone who has practiced veterinary medicine and is trying to figure out how to comply with these laws. And that's what we all have to figure out how to do, is comply with these laws. But that likely means we will be passing on changes that we have to make in our clinic because of the new laws, and clients don't like that. Clients don't like change. That hits staff at a personal level because change is what turns clients away and gets them upset. So I hope these laws will be enforced, because if I go through the hassle of abiding by them, I want to make sure other clinics are as well, since my staff will get the grief of making people abide by them. So let's get started. A little history about the Practice Act. The Board of Vet Medicine in Kentucky was created in 1942. In 1948, it was all repealed and a new Practice Act made. It wasn't edited again until 1992, and then again in 1998. and while there have been minor edits over the years, it's been nearly 30 years since a big edit. We don't redo the Practice Act all the time. So I'm happy that the input my clinic has provided can be seen in the Practice Act, as it may be there for 30 years or longer. In the Patreon, I will post the current Practice Act when we made this episode, and will have my notes in there with the discussion points I talk about, and a few others. I'll have this script on the Patreon as well once I get all my episodes out. Lastly, this episode is not to shame anyone. I break so many laws because I can't know them all. I truly believe in a spirit of the law versus the letter of the law, but the reason I am having this discussion is because I believe the profession has lost that spirit of the law and needs to look a little bit at the letter of the law. I believe that lack of respect for everyone playing by a fair standard is why many vets don't want to be in the profession. I know it's had me thinking hard. I hope this is helpful just to point out what the standards are, because maybe my colleagues don't know the standards, and that is why I'm having trouble collaborating with them. So join the Patreon and get the PDF with the notes, because it may be easier to follow along with this talk while looking at the PDF. And please, if you're a vet in Kentucky, just read the Practice Act. You can find it at www.kybve.com/practice-act.html. Basically, go to the board's website. Because it's good to know what laws you as a vet are required to follow. Okay, so here we go. I'm just going to start going through points that I saw. I'm going to give you page numbers. Those page numbers correspond to the PDF page number, not the document itself. So on page 7, KRS 321.181. Here we're going over definitions. They defined allied animal health professionals. This is a new thing and it concerns me. While I don't mind some specialization, I think they're using this to, in the future, allow lay people to do dentals, which I disagree with. The board is planning on letting in other people into the medical field, with some training in hopes of regulating them. But remember, this may take away from what vets can do, or at least give vets more competition. As a vet, I don't like medical services taken away from me, a trained medical professional. So pay attention to this and make sure to put input into the board. Let's be careful not to give away too much control of medical care. At the minimum, I would like to see any allied health professional have to work through or with a veterinarian. Page 9, they define client. Client means the owner or the owner's agent or other person presenting the patient for care, who has entered into an agreement with a veterinarian or allied animal health professional on behalf of the patient for purposes of obtaining veterinary medical services or AAHP services in person or by any means of communication or telehealth. We have a big problem at our clinic with this. The board has told us that the person bringing the animal can be considered as agent, which lets us off the hook if that agent tells us to do something and the true owner didn't want it done. However, we have so many people that can't fill out our client forms giving permissions for others to have medical records or to make medical decisions, so that when people call up later, we can't give them medical information. And this is challenging for making medical decisions. We've had people forge their friends' or family members' names on a client form and then be upset when we don't release information to the people who forged the document because their name isn't on the form. In reality, if your name is not on the account, if the account holder dies, we need a court order to release medical records. Clients don't like hearing that, nor are they good at filling out paperwork to prevent such problems. Yet, that is the law, and we as the clinic are very protective over such things as this paperwork and who brings an animal in. Why? Well, for one example, I had someone call asking me to come to a farm call to euthanize a dog. The owner said it was old. We asked them to bring the dog in because it was a Pomeranian. The person said, "Well, we can't do that. Then my neighbor will notice." I'm sorry, what? Yeah, the The neighbor's dog is old. We think it's suffering. We were just going to have you come out and euthanize it. Yeah, I didn't do that. But that's the challenge. When someone brings us the animal, we are going on some trust that the person can make decisions for it. That trust is broken all the time. Once it was so mundane that a husband and a wife came to an appointment. The wife stepped outside to take care of something and came back in, and the husband had made medical decisions for the dog. And we completed the treatment based on the husband's approval. My staff was cussed out by the wife from head to toe. We were like, "Ma'am, is your husband allowed to make medical decisions for the dog?" And she screamed that, "No, he wasn't!" So this is why my staff tries to figure out who is in control of this dog and its medical decisions. Moving on. Livestock means bovines, equines, sheep, goat, swine, poultry, captured or cultivated aquatic species, farm-raised cervidae and camelids, bees, and any other species used in the production of fiber, meat, eggs, honey, milk, and other food products. This is a big thing. While the board distinguishes what livestock is, clients don't always see these as livestock. It is our duty as vets to protect certain drugs and to protect public health. Often clients don't understand why there are drugs that could help their animal, but I just can't use those drugs to help their animal. Well, it's because those are livestock animals and we have to protect the food supply and humans first. Sometimes we, as in veterinarians, the board and the consumer, forget that public health is what we were founded on, the food supply, not taking care of fun, fluffy animals. Oh, here's another thing. In the definitions, on page 12, they define the practice of veterinary medicine, and part of that is completing dentals. As an equine vet, I have voiced my complaints to the Agriculture Commissioner and the board about lay dentists. Most clients don't know that lay dentists are not allowed to work on horses in the state of Kentucky. And when I inform clients, they typically don't alter their behavior because, well, lay dentists are cheaper. Or the rest of the barn uses this lay dentist, so they do too. Lay dentists, though may be allowed in the future as an AAHP, are not allowed right now. While I would hope they are not allowed in the future, I'm curious what we are doing now to stop them from illegally taking away work from large animal vets. The board is here to protect the consumer in Kentucky. The consumer is demanding more large animal vets. But why would there be large animal vets if lay people do all our work? Everyone interested in large animal medicine should be asking the board why lay dentistry in the state is allowed to continue, because it is rampant. I submitted a case in March of 2023 about a case where I found a lay dentist improperly not only doing a dental, but surgery on a horse. Nothing happened. The case was tabled. On May 2nd, 2024, that board sent out a message. This message, actually. The KBVE currently has 5 open grievances alleging the practice of veterinary medicine without a veterinary license. They go on to say, blah, 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 blah. It is the intent of KBVE to pursue enforcement action to the fullest extent of the law against unlicensed persons practicing veterinary medicine on animals, and to pursue enforcement action against licensed veterinarians who improperly supply prescription drugs to unlicensed persons for the purpose of animal dentistry or other unlicensed practice. However, as I write this episode in June of 2024, I have not seen any action on the case I submitted. Last I checked with the board, the case was still tabled. This is not giving me a lot of hope that we will be stopping the practice of illegal lay dentistry in the state. Just so you know, the number of dentals that I have completed on horses have dropped progressively in the last few years. There are multiple factors to this, but I know part of it is lay dentists that I am competing with, and that is competition I should not legally have. I feel this is a break of a social contract between me, the vet who pays licensing fees to the state, and the state who doesn't enforce the laws that benefit me. They just want to take my money, it seems. Anyway, don't beat a dead horse, as they say. So, moving on. Next, the Practice Act has definitions of supervision, which for anyone who employs techs or assistants, this is important to note because it tells you what your employees are allowed to do. So immediate supervision means the supervising veterinarian is physically in the immediate area and within audible and visual range of the patient and the individual treating the patient. Direct supervision means the supervising veterinarian is readily available on the premises where the patient is being treated. I.e., this is what I do with dentals. I have the protocol set up and I'm typically working in my office while my staff is scaling and polishing the teeth, and then calling me to pull any teeth needed. Indirect supervision means the supervising veterinarian need not be on the premise, but has given either written or oral instructions for the treatment of the patient and is readily available for communications. I always looked at this as a phone call away. I have my techs give vaccinations. They have my protocols of when to vaccinate written down and our standard operating procedures in our handbook, and they have posted in the treatment area what to do when there is a problem like a vaccine reaction, with step-by-step what to do and veterinarians to contact, i.e. both me and, in case my phone is having issues, other vets I'm friends with. So some big takeaways from this supervision aspect is that I've heard of vets getting animals under anesthesia when the vet is not on the premises. From what I understand, this is a big no-no, and I think this is why the board flushed out some definitions. Okay, on page 14 of the definitions, we do define a veterinary specialist. Veterinary specialist means a veterinarian that has been awarded and maintains certification from an American Veterinary Medical Association recognized veterinary specialty organization, program, or college, and is registered in this specialty with the board. Basically, a specialist has extra training. For students coming out into the world, a normal vet can do anything that a specialist does if they feel comfortable with it. So don't limit yourself. Just be aware of your capabilities. Our license is no different from that of a specialist. For clients, we can't call ourselves specialists unless we get this extra training, even if we are as good as specialists at certain things, because we haven't completed that extra training. Specialists get extra respect from the average veterinarian in their particular field. I've had a few clients confused just because I am particular with these words, but I am trying to give my colleagues the respect they deserve when talking about individuals. Oh, here we are. This is a big one. KRS 321.185, the veterinary client-patient relationship. This is what we base our profession on, our relationship balancing the needs and wants of the vet, the client, and the patient, all while meeting the economic and legal responsibilities involved. This is what we like, right? The ability to practice and solve problems. This is what it's all about. And this is my passion about vet medicine, solving the problems in these parameters. It's exciting. It's why we are doing it, and clients don't understand the importance of the VCPR. I encourage everyone to read the text about this, but here are my takeaways. This relationship is where the parties involved allows the veterinarian to assume responsibility for making medical judgments regarding health of the animal. This is not for clients to come in and tell us how to treat animals, because please remember that as vets, you, the vet, get to decide how to treat. Clients can't tell you how to treat. Clients can decide to go elsewhere if they don't like the plans you present, or they can ask for alternate plans. Then they can discuss and choose the plans you to present to them, but they can't force you to do things you don't deem medically appropriate, nor should they. Also, 12 months. I don't think it was written down before, even though it was commonly understood. If I haven't seen you in 12 months, you are not my client. I can't just give you drugs. Sometimes I feel like I'd do better on the street corners peddling my drugs because everyone just wants to pick up drugs. I have to have seen you in a year to even discuss dispensing medications. So clients, don't call when it's been 3 years since you've seen me expecting to pick up drugs. I will need to see your animals. Vets, be careful. I know it's a pretty common practice to let some drugs slip out when you haven't seen an animal in a year. It's written down now. Each animal must be seen within a year. Also, here's an interesting thing. If you're a vet like me who does a house or farm calls, there is a caveat where you can dispense medications if appropriate, if you have inspected the premises where the animal is at. This helps me when I visit horses or cows and the person has 5 dogs that never come to the clinic. I'll be able to dispense some flea and tick medicine for them. Okay, another point. Arranged for or contracted emergency care or urgent care coverage by another veterinarian who can provide reasonable or appropriate medical care and has notified the client how to access emergency care. Basically, that little line is important and came about because, from what I understand, a lot of vets just took the phone off the hook at the end of the day, and people couldn't get in touch with them if they had a case they saw that day or had issues. Or maybe low-cost spay-neuter clinics just left town after the surgery was completed with no follow-up care. So we have to let clients know how to get in touch with someone who can help out in an emergency. So how I handle this is my phone tells people to go to my website. At my website, there's a list of people who can help with emergencies after hours. I could put the information on my phone message, as I know many practitioners do that, but since I'm mixed animal, it's not practical because I have so many animals that I see, and not one emergency clinic usually will see them all. Now, the one thing I have found clients complain about is, especially with my goat or cattle clients, if I am unavailable and the person I refer to is unavailable because they are also a single vet practice, there's no one else around. I'm sorry, I may be breaking the law by not giving you another number, but well, there aren't enough of us left to refer to, so I don't really have any option. Here's another point. The VCPR may extend to another veterinarian employed in the same registered facility who is licensed to practice vet medicine within the Commonwealth, so long as the other Kentucky licensed veterinarian has sufficient knowledge in the medical record to make a decision. This is nice. I never thought of a group practice where one vet might not be working the next day. So this is a good addition for common sense that another doctor at the same practice can work on animals legally or give advice even if another vet did the exam and is who their primary vet is. So this is a good call that the board added this. Let's see. Moving on. I'm on page 16 now. A veterinarian shall not violate the confidential relationship between the veterinarian and the veterinarian's client. Consultation by the veterinarian with another veterinarian or professional expert for the benefit of the patient shall not constitute a violation of confidentiality. This gets tricky, as I mentioned earlier. People don't like filling out paperwork. It's amazing how a couple comes in together and they love each other, but a month later they hate each other and are getting a divorce, and then who has access to the medical records can be a big deal. My staff gets a lot of grief for trying to protect people's records. Usually it's like, just give me the information, it's fine. And most of the time it is, but sometimes such information could be used for nefarious purposes. So we are sticklers for this stuff to make sure our clients are protected. Okay. A veterinarian shall not release information concerning a client or care of a client's animal except on the veterinarian's receipt of a written authorization or other form of waiver executed by the client. I really like this. In the world of texting, this is incredibly easy. We have a form people sign when they become new clients that lets them decide if records are released and who we can release records to. Anything else requires not verbal confirmation, but written confirmation. And since we don't always know whose voice is whose over a phone, we usually do a text from a phone number on record to release records, or an email from someone, from an email we have on record. It's amazing how many clients get frustrated about this, but we are just trying to protect their information. I know a lot of clinics would usually call another clinic and just ask for records to be transferred, and I never liked this. It seemed to be a clinic was just trying to be nice to another clinic, but I felt this medical information should be more protected. As I mentioned, my client forms let clients tell me how they want their info distributed. So sometimes when someone calls, we can just give it out, but sometimes they don't want it given out. But in all those situations, I like text and emails confirming things. I just feel this is more by the book. The vet world is becoming more litigated, and people's medical records show what care people provide to their animals, as well as where people live. So, this could have home addresses and other things that people don't want given out. We have actually had people cry. Multiple people break down crying, refusing to get us records because they didn't want us to see something on those records. So people are and can be very protective and emotional over their records. It's our duty to respect that as vets and protect ourselves. A confirmation text works well, written allowances works well, or sending records by emailing them directly to the owners can be very helpful as well. Veterinarians providing copies of records under this section may charge no more than the actual cost of copying, including reasonable time of staff. I'm not sure we have ever charged for records. Most of my records are sent digitally, and I just don't charge for that. I keep wanting to charge for paper records, which we may have to get to soon, but in general, we can digitally transmit these records, and it doesn't take too much time at all. But I have seen where people charge $15 to $75 for record transfers. I feel like my clients would go crazy and not be able to afford that. But one of those places was charging that money was a low-cost spay-neuter clinic. So obviously the people going there aren't rich clients. So I guess this is more affordable than I thought. I'll probably just continue to charge if I have to print out a bunch of stuff, but if people keep asking for printed versus email records, I may get to the point of charging for the time and supplies of my staff. And other people do it, so it's not unheard of. Page 17. A VCPR shall not be established solely by telehealth means. In the absence of a VCPR, any advice provided through telehealth shall be general and not specific. I really liked this in the Practice Act. I jumped on telehealth early, but soon realized it was only good for follow-ups. I like pictures of wound healing or skin conditions that I've already started treatment on when I've seen it in person. But I agree strongly, initial exams need to be in person. I'm glad this law is now in the books. Telehealth has also been challenging in my area because I imagine telehealth as a Zoom meeting where I could talk with the person face to face, see the animal, and the owner could send pictures to me while I'm talking with them, and then I could send back links to my pharmacy or other information in real time. I think this has only worked out once or twice, and every other time it's a phone call because most of my clients don't have Zoom. This also limits my ability to provide telemedicine, the area I practice in. So in general, my telemedicine is when people text me pictures for follow-up for cases I have already seen. Moving on. KRS 321.187, Medical Record Keeping. This is the bane of my existence right now. I have felt so disheartened with medical records. I have problems with many colleagues in Kentucky that keep notes that have very little information. When I'm following up care with animals and cannot get records, I go through a variety of emotions. Anger. The client paid for those records and the ability for another vet, in this case me, to follow up care based on what was done previously. I am a colleague. Why are my colleagues not giving me the professional courtesy of good records? I also feel frustration because I just can't follow up care well on patients when medical records don't chart drugs given, diagnosis made, recommendations made, or any information. Clients don't know this stuff and can't remember. So I just feel like when I don't get good records, that I'm not giving good care to animals when their history is so blank, or at least as good of care as I could give if I had more information. And that really disheartens me. I know I have angered a lot of my colleagues as I get more persistent and desperate for medical records. It's not because I hate them or think they are bad vets, but I feel if they aren't keeping good records, and I am, this is an unfair playing field. They're able to get more appointments in while I am taking the time to make good records. Getting clients in faster makes clients happier, and those vets are more likely to succeed with their clients. Or are they? Can they remember? Can the vets remember what they treated each patient they saw 5 years ago with? I know I can't. But I have had vets cuss out my receptionist who was just asking for records. I was emailed once when I asked for records that I wasn't a nice person. That was from a vet. Another vet refused to give me records on a cat that presented for surgery at my clinic that vet was treating for sickness at his. I've had vets ask me to take away my request for medical records, and a clinic close to mine, even after repeated conversations with receptionists and office managers where I kept asking for complete records, has typically only sent me the invoices. The amount of time I have spent trying to get records has distracted me from patient care. It's made me feel not respected as a professional by my fellow professionals, as they are not following the legal requirement to give me those records when clients request it. Then I feel bad for the patient. I have repeated tests and not know specific drugs that worked previously, so I have to start from scratch on treatment. Clients can be draining. I have had troubles with the government protecting the profession, which I mentioned some about earlier. But then I have the medicine and my fellow vets all going through the same problems, right? At least we are together. Well, no, they are breaking the rules and they don't have respect for me. So at the end of the day, I feel very alone in the profession. A Nickelback song comes to mind, and it's not as fun as I thought being the last one standing. So some notes on medical records. In Kentucky, you have to keep your records for 5 years. Here's an interesting little tidbit. On page 19, it states here, a records request may be required in writing. This confuses me a bit because, as I mentioned, it said it needs to be in writing. So I'm going to go with the in writing. I like paper trails. How quickly do we need to write medical records? They need to be completed within 48 hours and, upon request from the client, need to be transferred within 1 week. Please take note of this. I have had clinics that can't get me records in under 1 week's time. This is now illegal. Now, if any clients are listening, my staff always asks for records transferred when you schedule the appointment. Waiting to inform your previous clinic you need records transferred when you are sitting in my exam room is inappropriate. I tell my staff records requests, excluding emergencies, are a low priority. We usually get them out within the day, but I tell them within 48 hours is fine. So as a client, don't put vets in a position where they have to rush to get records out. It's not nice. I want to throw in another note about medical records when I receive them. I don't get upset if vets make mistakes. We are all human, and sometimes we forget to mark the result of a lab test or write something down incorrectly. My first thought with these issues are I'll call the vet and clarify. My problem is the majority of the records I get are so bad I can't even call to clarify because I have no idea what I'm going on. Okay, I'm doing that thing of beating a dead horse again. Here's our next point. An animal patient's medical record and medical condition is confidential and may not be furnished to or discussed with any person other than the client or other veterinarians, veterinary technicians, veterinary assistants, veterinary practice staff, AAHP permittees, or consultants involved in the care or treatment of the patient, except upon authorization of the client or under following circumstances. It goes on for those circumstances. But why I want to bring this up is people are nosy and just want to know what is going on in other people's lives. And they get mad when we can't discuss things with them. But we have had mothers and daughters not want the other to know what each is doing for and spending with these animals. So in general, I find it safer not to talk about the care other people provide for their animals. This frustrates clients, but is safer and seems much more professional. Not only that, it is a law that we can't discuss other people's information. Now, that being said, I use case examples for clients all the time. I don't tell them who or what, but I like telling them I have had cases that have resolved or not resolved using these treatments. But I don't say Mrs. Smith down the street, she paid $1,000 and that worked well for her. There is an exception where we can give out some medical records to anyone that asks. We can always verify rabies vaccination status of an animal. But remember, it's just the status. This is a change from the old Practice Act. Before, we couldn't legally tell, for example, an animal control officer or agent if the animal that they were working with was current on rabies unless we got a subpoena or release from the client. Which a lot of times the client's not going to tell them that, because if the animal control officer is involved, the client might be upset with the animal control officer. So we couldn't tell them if the animal was up to date on rabies or not. But now we can give them a yes, we are up to date on rabies, or no, it isn't up to date on rabies. Please note, we can't give them how long the vaccine is good for or when it went out of date. We can only give them a yes or no here. Unless, of course, the client has a release on those records. Here's an interesting one. I'm not sure how I feel about this. KRS 321.188. This is in regards of reporting of animal abuse. Basically, it says now we, as vets, we may make a report to the Office of the State Vet or law enforcement. Having worked with abuse cases, this section made it much easier because it says we may, not that we have to report suspected abuse. Before we couldn't report it. Now we can use our discretion. Abuse is harder to define in a legal sense than you would think. In my experience, judges rely on proving intent for abuse. And when vets report suspected abuse, it may hurt the practice and ability to treat the animals that you are trying to protect. And since the law doesn't always follow up well sometimes, you end up hurting yourself more than helping animals. I like knowing I can report abuse, especially if it could help people in an abusive situation. But I think to take advantage of this law, I would need very strong evidence that makes me think a judge would convict based on this abuse. I also would proceed very carefully, as my own values don't have to correspond to other people's values. And I know what I consider abuse may not legally be considered abuse. So I always tread carefully with those cases. Let's see. Page 21. So they touch on this next point a few times in the Practice Act. A person shall not use the designation veterinary technician, licensed veterinary technician, or any other designation indicating licensure status, including abbreviations, or hold that person out as a veterinary technician unless licensed for that profession. So there are many assistants, qualified or not, that call themselves techs. Either the community needs to discourage this, or the board is going to have to go through Facebook and go to clinics and make sure the licenses of techs are protected. I'll talk a little bit more about technicians later, but we have to be clear. If you aren't a technician, you can't call yourself a tech. This is pretty much all that technicians get in the state of Kentucky. Name recognition. Okay, here's another point. Unless exempted by KRS 321.200, persons engaging in the practice of veterinary medicine or practice of veterinary technology without credentials from the board shall be subject to enforcement and discipline by the board as established in KRS 321.352 and 321.990. Basically, if you aren't a vet, you can't do certain things. Exceptions are carved out for your own animals. You can pretty much do what you want to your own animals. But the problem comes in, for example, if you go out and help a friend pull a calf in a dystocia, you are practicing medicine without a license. So be wary about what work you do on other people's animals if you aren't a vet, i.e., don't do it. Further down in the Practice Act, if you are employed by someone and working on their animals, you don't have to worry about that. You're not breaking the law if you're employed by the person. And it does look like anyone can castrate or dehorn food animals. There are some other specific carve-outs, so look at that if you are curious. KRS 321.203. Allied animal health professional facilities will be registered with the board, shall submit a complete renewal application by the renewal deadline, and pay a biennial renewal fee for the renewal of the registration. So I actually totally agree that all facilities should be registered. We need to know the state of the industry in this Kentucky. However, all businesses already must pay fees to operate in the state of Kentucky, and I think this is double taxation. I'll pay it, but another reason I have to raise prices to my clients is because I pay the government to operate a business in Kentucky with Kentucky filing fees with the Secretary of State, and then I have to pay because I am a veterinarian. I'm not sure when these fees start, maybe 2025. I hope I get some notification. Here we go, 321.236. They want everyone registered by June 30th, 2025. KRS 321.351 goes over what the board can do when reprimanding a vet or someone practicing medicine. Looks like fines can be up to $5,000 or they can suspend or revoke licenses. So just read this section so you know how serious a board complaint can be. This is why I always hesitate to report someone to the board, because rarely, though I have, found professionals acting where I think they need a $5,000 fine. I think they just need to write better medical records. But it seems the board doesn't have an intermediate step where they could just investigate a concerning situation. It's all or nothing, it seems like. I have suggested to the board that there be a way for professionals to voice concern with a colleague where we can submit something we're concerned with, and the board can follow up and escalate that to a board complaint, but not an official complaint. But I am feeling forced to make board complaints when I see constant problems. KRS 321.443 defines what an assistant can do. Veterinary assistants shall only work in the Commonwealth in the following circumstances: under the supervision of a licensed veterinarian where VCPR exists, under the direct supervision of a licensed vet tech who is under the supervision of a licensed veterinarian where VCPR exists, and then duties of a veterinary assistant shall exclude diagnosing, prescribing meds or treatment, and performing of surgical procedures other than castrating and dehorning of food animals. Basically, assistants can't diagnose, prescribe medications, or treat. I would guess they can give prescribed vaccinations by a vet. But otherwise, this doesn't really specify or grant them any less than a technician. So, why be a technician? Okay, moving on. A veterinarian shall not issue a certificate of veterinary inspection, basically a health certificate, unless the veterinarian has personal knowledge through appropriate exam. And they shall not issue a health certificate unless he or she complied with all entry requirements of the jurisdiction of destination. So I know I did health certificates wrong in the past, but I only write them with seeing the horse now or doing a virtual exam. While I would love in-person exams, my clients just won't do this. they were trained by previous vets that they could just get health certificates for free by calling a vet. So to stay in business, I just charged to write them, and now I require a virtual consult, which, since I have seen the horse within the bounds of his VCPR and done the Coggins within the year, I think the virtual exam works well. So we all learn and adapt. However, I don't like this last part where they say we have to know what is required at a certain destination. I had another state vet's office tell me this is the owner's responsibility to know what they need where they're going to when they're traveling. I think we do a good job about looking this up for clients, but I still think it should be their owner's responsibility to see what they need when it comes down to it. This one was weird to me. They stated a veterinarian shall not physically abuse a patient under his or her care. This seems very common sense, and it's sad that it had to be put into practice. But then I started wondering, is it abuse when you beat the animal back that is trying to maul you? There are too many instances in our profession where people have been attacked by animals. Animal behavior of aggressive dogs is a big problem. Not that the Practice Act has this scope, but I think there needs to be a rule for all clients that their aggressive animals must be controllable. I remember once a dog bit me. I informed the owner, and the first words out of the owner's mouth were, "I'm not apologizing." I also think a lot of clients will jump on this section because they don't understand the difference between discipline and abuse. Here's another thing. A veterinarian shall have the right to refuse any patient. I like this. Like if I want to refuse seeing aggressive animals. It's just sometimes I don't know they are aggressive early enough to prevent problems. But I had a case different from an aggressive animal just the other day that came in and was sick. They came in and I basically refused to see them, saying they needed to receive care at a facility that had more appropriate medications and equipment on hand than I had. I just wasn't set up to treat what was going on, and they needed to go elsewhere. As a small business owner, I like being able to refuse certain things. This way, I don't have to work on spiders or aggressive dogs or things that I know I won't be able to help. Let's see, Section 15. A veterinarian shall not overutilize his or her practice. A practice shall be deemed to be overutilized if it exceeds the needs of the patient, considering the patient's history and subjective symptoms, the veterinarian's objective findings, the veterinarian's reasonable clinical judgment, and other information relevant to the practice of veterinary medicine. I have no idea what this means. I really don't. Moving on. A veterinarian shall create adequate records to document the veterinarian's examination and treatment of his or her patients in accordance with KRS 321.185. Oh my gosh, I have so many problems with this. Vets just don't want to send records, and I find it disrespectful to the doctor and patients. Section 20 goes on to say we have to keep records for 5 years. So those vets who say they don't have records and it's not been 5 years are breaking the law. Section 25. A veterinarian shall not write testimonials as to the virtue of medication, remedies, or foods, except to report the results of properly controlled, unbiased experiments or clinical studies. Yeah, this is hard because clients are always wanting opinion on drugs. And it's like, well, I carry this product, so I recommend it. I mean, can we not recommend the products we have seen, like on Facebook, our own Facebook pages? I'm confused about this one. I feel like this one is challenging. The next few paragraphs talk about getting consent before surgery or anesthesia or procedures, except in emergencies, where there's exclusions and stuff. We have forms for this. Here. Yes. In addition to attendance at a conference, lecture, or seminar, a veterinarian or veterinary technician may complete the hours of continuing education required for renewal by the completion of audio or video recordings or electronic computer or interactive material prepared or approved by any of the organizations established, blah, 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 blah. And there shall not be a limit to the number of online hours a licensee may apply to his or her renewal. I really like online CE because I can take notes and rewind and do things on my own time. This takes the pressure off, and I'm not a big fan of seeing people oftentimes, because no one likes me because I always ask for records and no one really wants to give me those. Let's see. Prescription means an order from a veterinarian to a pharmacist or another veterinarian authorizing the dispensing of veterinary prescription drugs to a client for use on or in a patient. Earlier I read that we may get another veterinarian to dispense a drug. I always thought that we weren't pharmacists, so that we couldn't do that. So maybe that's changed. But now I'm wondering, how do we take an actual prescription? Or do we get the medical record, see that we're allowed to give that drug? Oh gosh, how could we get the medical record? Doctors don't want to give that. But if we get the medical record, see that they're on this drug, we could then, dispense the drug. I'm really curious how that works. Prescriptions are supposed to have withdrawal times for veterinary drugs for food-producing animals. I generally have this on the receipt versus the label. I'm not sure if that's okay or if it has to be on the label. I don't know. I just have my reminder or the things in my computer set up to print on the receipt that we hand them and such. So, yeah, I'd be curious about clarification of that. Sometimes I feel like the board doesn't always quite understand large animal medicine when writing legislation. For example, here, the veterinarian recommends procedures to ensure that the identity of a patient receiving the drug can be readily ascertained in the future. And they don't really say anything about large animals, but I have so many goats and cattle. Well, it's a random black cow. The owners don't have ID on them. And, do I not treat them because they don't have ID? I'm not sure what they're saying here. A veterinarian shall not transmit a prescription electronically unless the client approves the transmission and the prescription is transmitted to a pharmacist or veterinarian designated by the client. So this is a little helpful to me. I don't do electronic prescriptions at all other than my own online pharmacy. I found there was no paper trail when I was doing this and that phone scripts could be misheard. So I didn't like emailing a script because who knows where the client would send this. But I like how we can send straight to a pharmacy or a vet where the client wants the drug filled. But I like my scripts written because when I give it to the client, it's their responsibility to take it to the place they want. Transmission and the prescription is transmitted to a pharmacist or veterinarian designated by the client. And here's something important. A veterinarian shall not refuse to write an otherwise appropriate prescription for a patient with a valid VCPR solely because the prescription may be filled at an establishment other than the veterinarian's own clinic or pharmacy. I have no problem with this at all. People should get their drugs where they want. But I do want clients to know that we are allowed to charge for this or in reality, our time to write it. And that's only fair. So if you're going to take your prescription somewhere else, I'm going to charge you for the time it takes me to write the prescription. A veterinarian may refuse to write a prescription for controlled substances or a prescription for any medication that in the vet's judgment is not appropriate for medical care. We've talked about this before a little bit, but I like this because some clients coming in wanting drugs. And I have refused to write or fill prescriptions for various reasons, most often because it's not appropriate to treat what's actually going on. It's nice having the backing of the law to do this. Here's one that Section 7, Rabies Vaccine Administration. The administration of a rabies vaccine shall be in accordance with the provisions of KRS 258.015 and 902 KAR 2.070. So KRS 258.015 is vaccinated against rabies by a veterinarian hold a valid Kentucky license. Since this doesn't specify a technician or assistant can't vaccinate these animals, both assistants and techs can give other vaccines, there's no reason to think that they couldn't give a rabies vaccine. There seems to be a thought that a vet has to do it personally, and I don't see that written if we look at a practice act as a whole. I see that techs and assistants can give vaccines. Rabies are a vaccine. So I don't see anything distinguishing it where a vet has to give the rabies. I don't know if the state agrees with me on that, but I don't get if we can trust techs to euthanize an assistant's surgery but not give a rabies vaccine. I think we truly need to reevaluate some things in the state because that means we don't appreciate our technicians. And I take the Practice Act as saying if a tech can give one vaccine, a tech or assistant can give vaccines for a veterinarian under appropriate supervision, that the rabies is included in that. And since it doesn't specify that it's not, that's how I work with that. Okay, here's another thing, Section 7. The client shall be provided options in writing for follow-up or emergency care during the 48-hour period after surgery that includes information for a 24-hour emergency veterinary facility or with another veterinary facility where professional arrangements have been made to see clients. I again accomplish this by having on my website, which my phone directs people to, a written diagram about what to do in an emergency. Ah, yes, now we get to a fun one. Cold sterilization shall not be an appropriate method to adequately sterilize surgical instruments for small animals. They go on to make some exclusions. But I made a big stink about this to the board when the Practice Act was being written. I lost, but my point was, if we don't allow cold sterile in small animal, we shouldn't allow it in large animal. Cold sterilization is not considered appropriate anymore, except it is in large animals. This is concerning to me for a few reasons. I don't know where the board was getting the cold sterile information from, but I have a study cited in my script where I believe that they got the information for not liking cold sterile. In that study, authors found 13% of cold sterile solutions were contaminated. This article doesn't take into account practices not using the cold sterile by manufacturer guidelines, which theoretically would lower that percentage even more if everyone was using cold sterile appropriately. While I agree autoclave sterilization is better, I disagree with this being put into the Practice Act for two reasons. First, I have the feeling that many of the writers may be distanced from rural medicine and do not understand that subtle price increases for specific surgeries caused by forcing autoclave use will be cost prohibitive from animals getting treatment due to financial constraints of clients, especially when competing with low or no cost charities. Second, if cold sterile is not acceptable practice in small animal medicine, it should not be acceptable in large animal medicine. Excluding it from large animal medicine likely is based on not wanting to inconvenience large animal practitioners whom we have so few of. But the answer is not to cling to old methods to slow old practitioners from retiring, but create an environment that new practitioners will be happy to enter into. As updating practice acts are not regular in Kentucky, I wanted them to make large animal medicine as progressive as small animal medicine. While different species require different work, if science says something is better, we must apply it to all and not one. My guess, and I could be wrong, is large animal practitioners want to have their cold sterile and don't know how they would transport their instruments without their cold sterile. Well, to see how that would work for me, I took my cold sterile and all the instruments in it and made sterile packs that I now run through the autoclave. And it works great. I just, at the end of the day, bring them back, get them autoclaved and cleaned up, and put them back in the truck. So that's pretty easy. So I don't get why it's appropriate to have cold sterile in the field when we can have sterile packs in the field just as easily as having the cold sterile. I also had my technician look into the prices, and besides the initial autoclave price, the sterilization was actually less expensive. So again, that's a battle I lost, and I just hope it's not hurting large animal medicine. Let's see. Here we go. Moving on at another section 1. A licensed LVT may perform acts as assigned under direction, supervision, and responsibility of a board licensed veterinarian to do. I sort of like this. I want to utilize my tech, but I don't want them starting up their own vaccine clinic or something. I don't think that is the right way for this. So I don't mind them giving vaccines for me, but I don't want them going out and just opening up a clinic on their own. With this, they have to follow a vet's direction. So my last section is about vet techs. It spells out what each can do. KAR 16.750. While I appreciate that assistants can do a lot, as my practice would be sunk without them, the KAR 16.750 emasculates the technician profession. What is the benefit of becoming a tech if an assistant can do everything that a technician can? The state of Kentucky is not going to get more techs because there's no benefit for them. I know why they did this. We don't have enough technicians in the state to support our vet practice. If we told assistants they couldn't do certain things, then most of the practices in the state would be crippled. So yeah, the board couldn't make laws to stop this, but by letting assistants to continue to have the same rights as technicians, then the only benefit a technician has in the state is name protection, which I haven't seen much enforcement with. So as I've told my assistants, a licensed technician who went to tech school and who only wanted to hire techs at his vet practice, I'm telling them now, don't go to tech school if you want to work in Kentucky. There's no benefit. So yeah, that's my take on the Practice Act. Sorry, I'm not as entertaining as John Oliver when he goes over a tedious subject. But I'm glad you listened to the end. And I think the Practice Act is good overall. I applaud the work everyone put into it. And again, I do stress this is in no way me trying to legally represent the board or tell you that what I say is how the Practice Act is supposed to be interpreted. This is just me reading it and telling you things that jump out on as to how I interpret them. Read the Practice Act yourself. Talk to the board or a lawyer if you have questions. I would encourage all veterinarians to read this document because I think a lot of the problems between colleagues are actually because everyone is practicing to a different standard. If we can agree, and we sort of have to agree because it's the law, on this standard, we'll be able to work together better and do better work for our patients. I'm Dr. Nathan. Thanks for listening. I hope our discussions are valuable to you and aid in giving perspective. If you want to contact us, please reach out to theveterinarypodcast@gmail.com. You can find a complete list of the podcast episodes on SoundCloud. If you find this information helpful and want more content, please join our Patreon, patreon.com/theveterinarypodcast. And don't forget to follow our Facebook page, facebook.com/theveterinarypodcast. As always, thanks for listening, and I hope this information is helpful to you. If you do find it helpful, please like it, share it, so other people may find it helpful as well.